Hello everyone, it's time for another live look at the astrology. My name is Katie Sweetman, and this is your look at the astrology for March 2nd through 8th, 2026. So we got a lot of a lot of things to talk about. So much I can't even say it. So it is eclipse season, in case you didn't already know that, and certainly eclipse season is living up to its reputation. But I just want to sort of go back for a second because we have a lot to talk about in the sense that we do have one more eclipse. In fact, tomorrow we'll have a lunar eclipse in Virgo, 12 degrees. We also are building upon some points that were planted in February. And in fact, and I've talked about this already. And even if you took my webinar for the astrology of 2026, or maybe even these videos, if you didn't do the webinar, I talked about how February is a really important month because we are moving into a new cycle that is symbolized by Saturn going to Aries, which it did on February 13th. Then we have Neptune in Aries, and then we had the Saturn-Neptune conjunction on February 20th. And so in English, what this meant, looking ahead, I'm saying this from the perspective of 2025, is that there was just a lot of energy concentrated in one month that had the potential to be big. I know that's like a really vague word, big. What does big mean? But you have to understand that there is nothing's absolute in astrology. There's no concrete, like this is going to happen, because in reality, that's why I say every week, the astrology is 50% and you're the other 50%, is because we can't forget that at least here and now, we have choices. And astrology is just energy. It's just the energy of time. It's how we live time. And the question that is for all of us, myself included, how do we live this time? How do we show up during this time? What choices do we make? And if February, I realize it's now March, happy March, if February is a crossroads, then we really start to see what these seeds have planted March, April, because that's when the sun starts to go into Aries. We'll have Venus go into even Aries this week. We'll have Mars won't go into Aries until April 9th. So the seeds have been planted. Just my concern as a human being is that a lot of things are escalating and quite frankly out of control. So how will this energy impact our March and beyond? That remains to be seen. And so, having said all that, I think what I can do as an astrologer is at least give you some information to reflect on a personal level. And I do believe, and it's even, let's say, going back to that Aquarius eclipse that we had on February 17th, that the next 6 months, maybe it's more, getting closer to 5 months at this point, the next 6 months are really not about the personal and the individuals, but the collective. We had an eclipse in Aquarius. So Aquarius is our stage and our backdrop for the next 6 months until August. But we're still individuals, but the individual is part of the collective. So how do we work on ourselves? And this comes to this week's Virgo lunar eclipse, again tomorrow. And Virgo and Aquarius, you don't really think, if you know a little bit about astrology, you don't really think that they have a lot in common. But Virgo turns the great wheel. It's the 11th sign. It talks about humanity, society, the collective. And Virgo is like the small wheel. It turns our daily lives. It's our routines. It's the things that really make our lives flow. So there is this dichotomy with these eclipses between the Aquarius new moon solar eclipse February 17th, the Virgo lunar eclipse tomorrow, March 3rd, where the wheels are turning. And on a personal level, I mean, not my personal level, just but our individual personal level, I think with the Virgo energy, and it really threads back even to that solar eclipse in Virgo that we had on September 21st, what do we do? How do we prepare? How do we organize? Because when I look back as an astrologer, maybe this is more through my personal lens, I look back at the last 6 months, I really was picking up on a lot of energy of preparation. Virgo solar eclipse. Virgo was the backdrop for the last 6 months. And so it was to clean out and organize, but also to really reshape our day-to-day lives and our habits and how we show up and how we show up for our commitments and duties and responsibilities. And so what has that made? There is a beautiful energy in Virgo, and just as an aside, I think Virgo is a greatly underrated sign in the zodiac. It doesn't have sort of the glamour of some of the other signs. Let's say Leo, the sign before Virgo. But Virgo helps us to connect to an energy that can help us progress ourselves, to become better versions of ourselves on a personal level. And so I say all these things just to sort of put a lot of things on the table, because like I said, we have a lot of things to talk about. And for those that don't know who I am, my name is Katie Sweetman. I'm an astrologer and psychic medium located here in the rolling hills of central Maryland. It's snowing. Like, it can't stop snowing. I know there's worse things in the world right now, but this is like the winter that has just, I know some of you are on the other side of the world and it's not winter, but it's just been a pretty cold winter. A lot of snow here in the mid-Atlantic Northeast of the United States. So yeah, you hear me say it every week. The astrology is 50%. You are the other 50%. So as the world turns, as these energies begin to unfold, as certain seeds are planted, what do we do? And my work always has been to bring an energy of consciousness and intentionality to our astrology. And this was really born out of my own, let's say, adolescence, of looking at my own astrology and reading the old books and reading things that were just very fatalistic and awful and terrible. And I'm like, there has to be something better. So there has to be something better. And maybe that's me speaking from the point of view of this Virgo lunar eclipse it's about to have tomorrow. But that said, wherever you are in the world, I really do hope you're well. A lot of things going on. We just, what we can do, at least on a personal level, I'm sure there's lots of things we can do on a personal level, but it is also to that Virgo energy to take care of ourselves, also to take care of other people. Virgo, like Pisces, it is Pisces season after all, is a sign that has a great need to serve and to help and to be of service to other people, a strong sense of duty. And so these are energies that are all well present as we go into the eclipse tomorrow, and even not just tomorrow. It really will be accompanying us for the next 6 months. So until the next set of eclipses, there will be a Leo solar eclipse on August 12th. This is the one that's visible throughout parts of Spain and Iceland and Europe, but we'll also have a lunar eclipse on, I think it's the 28th of August. So let's jump in. And for those that are watching live, as always, say hello. Let me know where you're watching from. Let me know how you're doing. How are you feeling this eclipse season? Sometimes this energy is intense. We have a hard time sleeping. Sometimes we have really vivid dreams. Sometimes things are just happening in our lives. But eclipses in general, they turn the wheel. I know I've said that already, but they sort of turn the wheel. They reset the stage. They open and close doors. And this happens every 6 months. So eclipses are not that rare, but what was rare, at least with the solar eclipse that we had on February 17th, was the Saturn-Neptune conjunction of the February 20th. So that doesn't happen very often. So let's dive in. So we are in eclipse season, and tomorrow's lunar eclipse in Virgo at 12 degrees. It, in a way, is the finale of eclipse season. But for me as an astrologer, we really need to get to that Pisces new moon. This will be on March 18th, or 2 weeks from now. And that will close out this eclipse cycle that we've been in, at least the one for right now. Just to throw it in, you've heard me say it other times before, eclipses, they can plant seeds, and so there will be key moments over the next 3 to 6 months where we will get a bigger idea about what this eclipse season was all about. And one of those will be when Mars gets into Aries on April 9th. The other will be when we get 3 months before the next solar eclipse. So this will be in May, around mid-May, but I am jumping ahead of things. We also have Mars going into Pisces this week. In fact, today, the 2nd of March, Mars is already in Pisces. I will come back to that. And we will also have Venus go into Aries. I will also come back to that. So let's talk about lunar eclipses. Lunar eclipses, they are when a full moon is within a certain amount of degrees of what's called the ecliptic. So the ecliptic in astrology, I'm speaking technical speak for a moment, the ecliptic in astrology is symbolized by something called the lunar nodes, these 2 points in the sky that act as a symbolic compass point for all of us, personally and individually. And since I think it was July 2025, the lunar nodes have been in Pisces and Virgo. So these are 2 signs that I like to call the helping and healing signs. The North Node in Pisces, to some degree, is saying we really need to reach towards Pisces right now. Empathy, compassion, understanding, transcendence. These are words that obviously are not how we live our day-to-day lives because we're humans. But Pisces does set a high bar for all of us. And we also had eclipses in Virgo, Pisces. We had eclipses in September 2024, March of 2025, into April 2025, and September of 2025 as well. So whatever is coming around these eclipses, they're not new. They're part of an unfolding story. But what was really new was the fact that we had that eclipse in Aquarius, and we haven't had eclipse in Aquarius since 2017 and 2018. So go back to my live a couple weeks ago because I really break down the importance of that Aquarius new moon. And so if Virgo and Pisces are the helping and healing signs, and if Pisces generally sets a very high bar for us, it represents the finality of the zodiac. The finality of the zodiac, Pisces, 12th sign, it is the search for unity. It is what we find at the end of the zodiac, because we start the journey in Aries, the sun in Aries, each year symbolically, and we walk that path each month all the way until we get to Aries season again. So we get to Pisces season, it sort of represents the end of a long journey, the search for unity. It doesn't mean that we always find unity in Pisces. Just look out the window these days. But that's, like I said, Pisces sets a high bar, but at the end of the day, we are human beings. So the cycle resets again when the sun goes into Aries. And so when we have eclipses in Pisces, I realize this eclipse tomorrow isn't in Pisces, but the sun is in Pisces. It is really pulling into bigger existential questions. Why am I here? What is the meaning and purpose of my life? What is the meaning and purpose of all of this? And so to some degree, this eclipse, let's keep in mind that the sun is in Pisces, but also Mercury, the ruler of the eclipse, is in Pisces. So Pisces receives the energy of the eclipse tomorrow, asks us big questions. What on earth is going on? Why is everything so crazy right now? I don't know. Maybe this is just part of this passage that we're going through, but that's a bigger conversation. So we have big questions to try to answer. Try being the operative word. But then on the other side of the sky, Virgo lunar eclipse, Virgo in general sort of is the very grounded and real side of our lives. It's you wake up, you brush your teeth, I hope, you have the things that you do, the things that you need to do, both just to make sure your day functions, but the things that you need to do as a human, because if you don't take care of yourself, if you don't manage your hygiene, your health, and your wellness, it's not a good long-term strategy. So Virgo really gets into the brass tacks of being a human being, and we have to eat well, we need to get exercise, we need a sense of organization, but also we need to show up. And to some degree, Virgo is really asking these bigger questions about how are we showing up at the moment, showing up in our lives, showing up in our relationships, showing up on bigger issues also. And so this Virgo lunar eclipse, lunar eclipses, they have a sense of immediacy to them. Typically, because a full moon in general is not a calm and quiet time, just ask your nurse friends or the friends that work in the ER. They will tell you, or even you have friends that work in law enforcement, they'll tell you that the time around the full moon is just really intense and things happen. plus a lunar eclipse. So lunar eclipse kind of turns up the frequency, and it's why we get to different moments in our lives, or even different moments throughout the year, and we might feel that we are at a crossroads. Something happens, doesn't have to be dramatic, doesn't have to be negative, of course not, but something happens, even if it's within, that says, I want to go this way, or I need to go another way, or I need to make a change. Or maybe you are in responding to events that are happening around you. So Virgo means the things that it means for all of us: health, wellness, service, critical thinking skills, systems, organizations, that small wheel that I mentioned earlier. But it's also something very specific for your own astrology. It could be your career sign. It could be your relationship sign, for example. And if you are a mutable sign, so you are a Virgo, you're a Pisces, you're a Gemini, you're a Sagittarius, so think about that for a second. These are the signs that are really feeling this lunar eclipse energy the most. It does have the opposition to Mercury. Mercury is retrograde. Don't worry, that's not the end of the world. It says that there's something around this eclipse that we need to take a second look at. We need to see things from a different point of view. Maybe there is something that is unfinished, unresolved. I spoke about this in my update last week, that I find it really interesting that Virgo is retracing a path that Saturn was in 2024 and 5. And so maybe there's something literally from 2024 and 2025 that we need to go back and to look at from a different point of view or a different perspective, because Mercury ultimately is the choices that we're making, and how, with the help of a Mercury retrograde, can we make different choices, for example. So this lunar eclipse is tomorrow. It does point also towards Jupiter in Cancer. So we do have Jupiter in the sign of its exaltation. I know that's a technical point. Just as a side note, if you want to learn astrology, of course you need to learn the vocabulary, the alphabet, the signs, the planets, the aspects, the houses. But really, to understand astrology, you need to understand the rulerships and how the energy flows and points. So in the case of the lunar eclipse, the energy of the lunar eclipse points towards Mercury in Pisces. The energy of that solar eclipse, February 17th, pointed towards Saturn at 0 degrees of Aries. So Aries received the energy of that solar eclipse. And Aries is very provocative. It's about action. It's about new beginnings. And so that's why there's a lot of Aries energy very present archetypically at the moment. So going back to rulerships is to really follow where the energy is moving. Okay, that's a side note. So we have this lunar eclipse. Jupiter is in Cancer, and I still hold out hope. I'm a Scorpio. I'm a pragmatist. I have a lot of Saturn in my astrology. You know how much I love Saturn, but there's a beauty to Jupiter in Cancer, and maybe there is an opportunity to have an opening, to have a deeper connection with the energies of this lunar eclipse, for example. Then let's go to Mars in Pisces. This is actually happening today. In advance of the lunar eclipse, Mars, it has spent the last 6 weeks in Aquarius since January 23rd. Pisces is a very different sign for Mars. And in a way, I've already spoken about this because I talked about how Pisces is the end of a very long journey. That journey could be a year, that journey could be a lifetime, that journey could be all of your lifetimes, because Pisces represents that sort of search that we're all on as human beings in a physical body. So Mars, which is typically about action and power and drive and motivation, things that we need to get out of the bed in the morning and get things done. It's about desire. It's typically a planet that leans more towards the individual. In Aries, it's about what I want, what I need. In Scorpio, the other sign of its rulership, Scorpio, it's about really using that power, psychological power of Mars in Scorpio to be able to get into very deep spaces, either within oneself or with another person. There's intimacy, there's vulnerability, there's trust, power, control. But in Pisces, it's about something that's not individual. And so action and drive and power and motivation have to now be expressed through Pisces: compassion, empathy, emotions, because Pisces also represents the great emotional body. It's not my feeling, it's not my wants. It's something that's connected to a greater whole. For example, are we all going to magically become better people with Mars and Pisces? Probably not, but it's sort of that reminder that there is a very high bar in Pisces that symbolically represents something that we are all reaching for, and it gets into deeper existential questions. It gets into how are we using our power, how are we taking action, how are we showing up, and this will all sort of move a lot of deeper emotional and psychic material while Mars is in Pisces. Mars is also in the same sign as the north node of the moon. Mars will activate eclipse points, particularly this lunar eclipse. It'll reach the eclipse degree on March 18th. So March 18th might be thereabouts a time to really look towards about what's going on with Mars coming up in opposition to this Virgo eclipse degree. It's not a quiet time. It's very likely not going to be it's going to not be quiet for probably a while. And I just, as an astrologer, but also as an intuitive, just have a lot of question marks around March, just being honest. So we also have Venus going into Aries this week. And speaking of rulership, so Venus is now going to be in the same sign as both Saturn and Neptune. Neptune went into Aries back on January 26th, and then Saturn went to Aries, as you may know, on February 13th. And so Venus is what do we love, what do we value, what we invest our time and money on. And in Aries, not typically a place that Venus is at home in, but it's going to really meet up with the energies of Saturn and Neptune. This will be the first time that Venus, I believe, has not made a conjunction to Neptune in Aries in 160 years. I'd have to go back and look, but I know for a fact that Venus has not met up with Saturn and Aries for 30 years. So Venus is really beginning to give us more information about what this new time is about with Saturn and Neptune in Aries. So having said all that, I just wanted to quickly share that I am, speaking of Aries, I am doing a workshop. It's going to be on March 21st, so right in time for the equinox. I realize we are in different parts of the world. Aries is still Aries. I know it's a different season for our friends down in the Southern Hemisphere, but I am doing a workshop on March 21st from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern Time. It will be, I'm calling it Sacred Fire, for us to connect the energies of element fire, to connect to the equinox, connect to Aries, and really find that energy not just within our own astrology, but to find it within ourselves so that we can use it with Saturn and Neptune as our guides to really set a course for the year. So astrology, you've heard me say this, astrology considers Aries as the astrological new year. So it's a time of renewal, new beginnings, and I hope you can join me. It will be recorded if you cannot participate live. We will be doing different practices, just energetic, to be able to connect with these archetypes and these energies that are present in your chart, that are present in the zodiac, so that we can really begin to feel Aries and Mars. So the link is in the show notes. It's on my website. It's called Sacred Fire, and I hope that you can join me. So March 21st is in time for the equinox. So let's look at each of the 12 zodiac signs so we can get a sense of what this eclipse is activating, starting with Aries. So Aries, I know it's not your birthday, but there's just a lot of stuff starting to happen in your astrology. Of course, you already know that you have Saturn in Aries, Neptune in Aries. We got to get to the 20th of March until the sun gets into Aries. So you're sort of like one foot in something new, one foot in something old. And maybe you're feeling a little bit of that tension point between these two different parts, or even two different cycles of your life. We are coming off of that eclipse that we had back on February 17th that really says that for the next 6 months, one of your priorities is friends, community, society, humanity, social issues, and social causes. That said, Mars is your planet. Mars today, the 2nd of March, it went into Pisces. So for the next 6 weeks, this is part of that got one foot in something old. Mars is taking you back to a space where it's about endings, letting go. And I say taking you back because Pisces is the space that Saturn was in for the last 3 years. So it's a well-worn path at this point, and maybe Mars gives you a chance to have a second look, or to let something go, or to rest and recuperate, to transition, because when Mars gets into Aries on April 9th, it's a very different time, at least symbolically speaking, for your astrology. That said, the real headliner for this week is that Virgo lunar eclipse. Virgo is something called your sixth sign. So we've already had a couple eclipses in Virgo in this cycle, the September 2025, March of 2025. Virgo is either your health and wellness, so this is continuing a story about your physical health, diet, fitness, nutrition, eating your vegetables, taking your vitamins, for example, or something more, depending on what's going on in your life. Or it could be your work, something about your day-to-day functions, how you organize your life, your duties and responsibilities. But there's still this push and pull in your astrology between the day-to-day grind, but also the bigger stuff, like, why am I doing this? What is the meaning and purpose of my life? And just and I've said this in previous recordings over the past few weeks, there's a lot of big astrology that's happening in Aries' chart. It's a time of new beginnings, and I just think with this Virgo lunar eclipse, you got to clean a lot of stuff out, or organize and prepare, so that you can really be better situated for this new beginning. Taurus. So Venus is your planet, and this week Venus is coming to the end of its time in Pisces. Pisces has been a larger focus over the past few years, whether it's eclipses, whether it's Saturn in Pisces, and Pisces is about your community, your friends, your social circle, your sense of belonging, but also wanting to be of service in the world, social issues and social causes. And so that will begin to shift this week on the 6th of March. Venus will go into Aries. Aries represents the last sign in your zodiac. Venus will be in Aries until, I'm just looking at the calendar, March 30th, because that's when Venus will go into Taurus. So between March 6th and March 30th, it's a time of rest. It's a time of going in. It's a time of asking yourself big existential questions. It's to shed the past. It's to let go. And Venus will be in the same space as Saturn. So there's sort of this reactivation of a bigger time, and even the bigger priorities that are really shaping your life 2026, 2027, and into the beginning of 2028. For some Tauruses, this is a time of endings, or it's a time of transition, or it's a time where you're really trying to prioritize your spiritual growth, your spiritual wellness, or even service to something greater. That said, the Virgo full moon, this Virgo is something called your fifth sign. It gets into bigger questions about identity and self and who you are. Who are you? I don't know why that's not the great English, but this lunar eclipse also can talk about passion and creativity, and maybe needing to get that spark back, because a lot of things are shifting and moving, or maybe it is about identity, and you need to really sort of re-actualize how you express who you are, and sort of this idea of who you are. But look back towards that solar eclipse, September 2025, and even March of 2025, when you had a lunar eclipse in Virgo, because you might see some patterns and some reoccurring themes. Gemini. So Mercury is your planet. As you know, Mercury has been retrograde since last week. Don't worry, it's just that time every 3 months when it's about going inward, using your intuition, resurfacing something that maybe you went over too quickly, or you need to make a different choice from a different point of view. Pisces represents your career sign. It's your career sign, but it's also your public life, your public duties and responsibilities, the title after your name. It's a very worldly part of your astrology. So for some Geminis, it's not about career per se, but it is about the place and the role that you have in the world, and even your relationship with power in the world. And so with Mercury retrograde, there's something that you need to sort of retrace your steps on. I said this last week, and I think it's still important to say again. Mercury is in the same space that Saturn was in 2024 and 2025. So it might be literally you need to go back to something that is from that time, or something that is unfinished and really needs a resolution, for example. That said, it is Pisces season, so it is the part of your personal astrology where the planets are typically arcing over the top part of your chart, which is your public life, your external world. But we do have a Virgo lunar eclipse this week, and Virgo for you is your sign of home, family, roots, foundation. It is your literal address, meaning it's the place where you reside. You know, should you be so lucky. It's also a place where you put down roots, but it is the past, it is memory, it is ancestors. And so a lunar eclipse is a little bit different than, say, that solar eclipse that you had in the space back in September, although you did a lunar eclipse back in the space in March of 2025. But sometimes when there's a lunar eclipse in the fourth, Virgo, for you, there's a change in the household. There's a move, somebody moves in, somebody moves out. It's the birth of a child, or a family member needs your attention, and maybe you're thinking, I don't have family or children. It doesn't have to literally be that, but it could also be a time when you're really emotionally yearning for something and trying to reach towards the past, and maybe thinking more abstractly about home and family and roots and foundations. But lunar eclipses typically have more an immediacy to them. The difference between this eclipse and the one, say, back in March of 2025 is that Mercury is in Pisces. So there is this tension point between your inner world and your outer world, your public life and your home life, that sense of roots and foundation and stability, and maybe the things that are really pushing and pulling at your astrology. Let's not forget that Mars is now in your 10th sign of career. It's really heating up your public life, your public reputation, your professional life over the next six weeks. So it's just a lot of things going on in Gemini's world. Cancer. So the moon is your planet. Tomorrow we have a lunar eclipse, and typically as a Cancer, there is that sense of fluctuation and emotions that Cancers are known for, because the moon has the ebbs and flows. It waxes and it wanes. And when the moon is full, typically you feel it as a Cancer. You are more sensitive. You are an antenna. You pick up on things. You know, Cancer, it has a deep craving and instinct to create stability and security, typically through emotional connection, family, roots, the past, and memories. And that might be something that's being activated this week. I realize this eclipse is not in Cancer, but it is activating the moon. Now for you, this eclipse is in Virgo, something called your third sign. The third sign is the sign of voice, communication, how you think and listen and learn. And this lunar eclipse is sort of putting the spotlight on this part of your life. Maybe you're quite literally thinking about taking a class, or you're reading more, or it's about education as an abstract topic, or maybe you're really looking at how you speak and how you communicate and the words that you use. With Mercury pointing towards something called your ninth, it's about, what do you believe in? What do you stand for? What do you think is true? What is your truth? What is your convictions? Mercury is in the same space. Now Mars is, so you've got a lot of things going on, something called your ninth, the same space that Saturn was in for 3 years. And so you spent the last 3 years really working to build a bigger framework about, again, what do you believe in? What do you stand for? What do you think is true? But that said, for some Cancers, this time is very educational. For some Cancers, it's more about showing up and like expressing something. And maybe even for some Cancers, you're writing, you're publishing, you're teaching a class. You're not the one taking the class, you're teaching the class. But that's where a lot of this energy is being focused at the moment. And for some Cancers, it could be even about travel. With so much going on your ninth, it's about the journeys that we take in life, particularly when we get on a plane, we go someplace very far. But journey is something that I think is being activated just as sort of a larger concept, and for you to sort of reflect on, where is life taking you and what is this journey that you are on. Leo. So the sun is your planet, and the sun right now is in Pisces. So Pisces season for you is the season, it's the time in your personal calendar when the sun is in your 8th sign. The 8th sign kind of is like a Scorpio energy. It's different for you because it's Pisces, but Scorpio is about things coming to an end so that they can be reborn. It's the psychology, it's the intimacy, emotionality, it's that inward search. And so this is the season where typically you're looking inward. At least that's the idea. You need to face yourself. The real power of the 8th is the work on the ego and where it gets to be stripped away so that you can be reborn in the 9th, which is you have a bigger access to your higher self. But that's on a more of a esoteric and even psychological level. So with the 8th so activated right now, it's to really look inward. This is the same space that Saturn was in over the last 3 years, where a time where you did a lot of emotional heavy lifting. And maybe it's to look back at who you became over the last few years. Mercury is in a space that's retrograde. It's trying to get you to retrace your steps, to go back to something that maybe was present with you in 2024 and 2025 that maybe is unfinished or it needs a second point of view. Mars is in this space, so Mars for the next 6 weeks is really activating a lot of deeper emotional energies. So whatever you need to do to sort of really find that anchor point within. But then there's the Virgo lunar eclipse. You had an eclipse in those space, September 2025, March of 2025. So whatever is going on may connect to that larger story. The second, Virgo is your second sign, is money, income, material stability, and security. So it could be literally a lunar eclipse where you're very focused on the income that you're making or the income you're not making, or sort of bigger questions about what do I need, what's important, what's of value, what's of worth. Maybe it's a lunar eclipse where you're really feeling this push to create some sort of stability and security in your life. Or maybe it's a lunar eclipse where it's more about self-worth and value. Pisces and Virgo also can touch more deeply into financial themes. So that's something that might be way more active in your life right now. And typically with an eclipse, typically with a lunar eclipse, there's an immediacy that we need to do something. It's not a passive time. So really be present in what's going on in your life, and maybe this eclipse is pushing you to make a change. Virgo. So Mercury is your planet, and Mercury, as you know, it's been retrograde since last week, and it's retrograde in your 7th sign of relationships. And I said this last week, and I'll say it again. I think it's really interesting because Saturn was in your relationship sign of Pisces 2023, 2024, and 2025. So Mercury, in a way, as through its retrograde, is resurfacing parts of the sky that it was in 2025 and 2024. So maybe there are loose ends. Maybe there's something that you need to go back to. Maybe you need to see things from a different point of view. Isn't annul the choices that you made or the things that happened during those years, but maybe something you sort of need a light bulb to go off that hadn't gone off before. Mars is in this space. Mars hasn't been in this space since April 2024, speaking of 2024. But maybe Mars is really beginning to heat up this sort of bigger theme around relationships. It's not just intimate relationships. It is relationships as a whole, because as human beings, we're not islands. We need connection. We need socialization. So even if you are single or not in a relationship, or that's not important to you, do keep in mind that this is a time that's trying to create more balance in your life, because you can't do things all alone. That said, you have a Virgo lunar eclipse. You have the spotlight on you. It's not, it's a very dynamic time in a Virgo's, whether you're Virgo sun or Virgo rising, it's like things are happening. Maybe things are happening in your life where you need to take action. You need to be a Virgo and be the boss of something and put things in order and clean things out. But maybe with that dynamic opposition with Mercury over in your relationship sign, it's a reminder you can't do everything alone. It is to ask for help. It is to have systems in place that allow things to be more in balance. Libra. Libra. So Venus is your planet. And as you heard me say in the introduction, Venus is going into Aries this week. So it's been in your sign of Pisces, your sixth sign of Pisces for the last, like 3 or 4 weeks. And so it's been a time for you to really focus on health and wellness and duties and responsibilities. The sun is there right now. It's Pisces season. Saturn was there for the last 3 years. So this is a bigger area that's received a lot of attention. 2023, 2024, 2025. It's also a space that's about service and sort of the roles that you take on and the roles that you perform, acts of service. And I think on some level, I feel, especially with a Libra rising, is that it's to put things in balance, because Libra typically will put other people first. It has wonderful qualities. It's really great at negotiation. It's really great at making sure that everybody gets what they need, but sometimes at the expense of Libra. So I wanted to say that because now Venus, at least starting on the 6th, Venus is going to go into Aries. And so it pulls your energy over to relationships. So relationships really take more of a center stage into the next 3-4 weeks and beyond, and I'll get to that in a moment. But it's relationships as a greater whole. It's to really survey this part of your life, like who is in your life, who are the relationships. Do you have a partnership? Are you single? Do you hide, you never leave the house? So this is a time to really connect with other people. The other thing I want to talk about, that's why I said I'll come back to this, is Saturn is in this space. So Venus will meet up with Saturn on Sunday, the 8th of March. And that's like your first real check-in with the fact that Saturn is in your relationship sign. And Saturn will be here until April 2028. And so that's why I said it's a bigger priority, this part of your life. Saturn might be asking you to make new commitments to the people that are already in your life, or to set a boundary, or to say no, and to say no maybe in the circumstances that's relevant to, or to build something with somebody else, to find that balance that I talked about earlier. But it's a big time in Libra's astrology, and for different reasons. If you're Libra sun versus Libra rising, that's kind of a bigger conversation. But listen for Venus going into Aries March 6th. Listen this weekend as you go into Monday. What's coming up around relationships, what's coming up around you, what's coming up around commitment, and sort of reaching a new stage of your life, because it's really going to help clue you into a bigger story that's going on in your astrology. Before I forget, there is a Virgo lunar eclipse this week, tomorrow, March 3rd, and Virgo is something called your 12th sign. So Virgo comes before you, so it represents endings, a cycle that has been lived. It's also spirituality, spiritual service, and it gets into bigger existential, emotional, and spiritual questions that we all have as human beings, typically. Sometimes when there's a lunar eclipse on the 12th, it means that we need to let something go, because the real work of the 12th is the detachment to our earthly attachments. And the 12th reminds us that you can't take it with you. So what do you really need to leave behind in order to step forward into this new phase and chapter of your life? Scorpio. So Mars is your planet, and Mars is now it's in Pisces. So we've had the last 6 weeks, Mars was in Aquarius. It really touched upon bigger themes that now that Pluto's in Aquarius, and even the solar eclipse that we had in Aquarius on February 17th, that are going to really shift and shake, I was Freudian slip, or shape your next 6 months, if not beyond. But Mars moves the energy now towards your 5th. The 5th, I love the 5th. It's a place of passion, joy, creativity, self-expression. Maybe you need that time to come back to yourself, to get back to that spark of life. And this is the same space that Saturn was, although very different energy than Mars. But Saturn was in this space 2023, 2024, and 2025. And in that time, Saturn was saying to you, it's time to take yourself and take your talent seriously. It's been 2 years since Saturn was in Pisces. We have to go all the way back to April into the beginning of May of 2024, when the last time Mars was in Pisces. And so Mars is returning to a space that sort of Saturn had very different wants and demands back then. So maybe Mars needs to live this time. Take yourself, take your talent seriously. Get back to the things that actually light you up and give you joy and give you passion. Because when Mars goes into Aries, same sign that Saturn is, this won't be until April 9th, then it's a lot of work April into May. But we don't need to get ahead of myself. That said, the real headliner for this week is a Virgo lunar eclipse. Virgo is something called your 11th sign. You've had eclipses in this space back in March of 2025, September 2025, and so the Virgo is something called your 11th. It is your friends, it is your community, it's society, humanity, social issues, and social causes. It is a place in our astrology that takes us very far from ourselves. It reminds us that we're not individuals, and so there might be something that you need to tend to. Maybe it's within your friend group or your social circle. Maybe it's something on a community level. You want to take action. You want to be involved in something. Or maybe it's something bigger about the self and identity, because this eclipse is pointing towards Mercury and Pisces. There's that sign again. It's about you and it's about the world. And how do you find the balance between the things that are important to you and the things that you need versus the things that are much bigger than you and that are also important as well. Sagittarius, the Jupiter is your planet. As you know, we've been saying this since last June, but Jupiter will be in Cancer, where it is right now, until the end of June of 2026. So for you, Cancer, it's something called your 8th sign. It's a time, almost a year in total, to look inward. It's very psychological. It's about the past and memories. Could be about family, ancestry, but it's a lot of inward searching over this time, and that will shift as you get into the second half of the year when Jupiter goes into Leo. That I'm sort of jumping ahead of things, but what the real news this week is this Virgo lunar eclipse. And as a Sagittarius, let's sort of rewind for a second, because right now the Sun is in Pisces, Mercury is in Pisces, Venus is in Pisces, although not until it'll leave on the 6th. And Pisces is something called your sign of home and family and roots and foundations. So this is the time in your personal calendar where it's time to go inward. It's about your internal life. It's about the needs and duties of your home environment. Maybe you're moving. Maybe you're just trying to clean up and organize and better your environment. And this is the same space that Saturn was 2023, 2024, and 2025 into the very beginning of 2026. And I feel as, whatever is happening right now, in a way, it's very much connected to what was present in your life over the past 3 years. So let's go back to Virgo. Virgo is not your home life. It's the opposite. It's your work life, your public life, the title that's after your name, the role that you play in the world, the duties and responsibilities that come with it. It doesn't have to necessarily be about quote unquote career for you, because not everybody has a career, but we all have duties and responsibilities. We all have some sort of public life, even if we are very anonymous. So this lunar eclipse is really putting a spotlight on a part of your astrology that is asking you to take more responsibility, to navigate something, to be a mentor, to be an authority, to be a leader, to make a change in your public life, or make a change even in your professional life. There can be recognition, there can be notoriety, but it's not a quiet time to be a Sag or a Sag rising. And this is playing off of eclipses that we even had in 2025. So whatever is happening, it's not a new story, but it's also saying that this is a possible pivot month for you. March is an important time. And just to go back to Mars, because I had it on the mind, Mars is now in Pisces, your sign of home and family, roots and foundations. So it's also saying that the next 6 weeks until the beginning of April, it's not quiet in your home. There could be projects, there could be moves, there could be cleaning out, but Mars energy just typically means that family is your short-term priority for the next 6 weeks. Capricorn. Capricorn. So Saturn is your planet, and Saturn, as you know, February 13th, it's now in Aries, where it'll be until April of 2028. That's the thing about being a Capricorn and your planet is Saturn. Your life unfolds through these bigger chapters, and Aries for you is your sign of roots, foundation, home, family. You've entered into a very different time in your astrology. For example, since the beginning of 2018, all the way until this past February, it was very much about you, your individual development, your personal needs and wants, new cycles, new beginnings. But now in now in Aries, it really brings you into a chapter of your life for the next 7 years, because Saturn works in 7-year quarters, 7-8 years, where it's about home, it's about this sort of that your inner world. So that said, you're in a different time, and family is your focus and priority for the next 2 years. If it's not literally your family, it is about this bigger questions: where is home and who is home? Saturn, I know it's your planet, but Saturn typically follows the milestones of our life. We graduate, we get a job, we get married, we have a kid. I realize these are more traditional milestones, and it doesn't have to be traditional, but Saturn typically marks those. I'm saying this as a Scorpio, the things that you write in your obituary, the things that really built the timeline and the story of your life. And so your big focus and priority is home and roots and foundation and family for the next 2 years. That said, we have a Virgo lunar eclipse. Virgo is something called your 9th sign. The 9th sign is a space where we really look towards the world. It's on a very surface level. It's education, but education on a higher level. It is the degrees that we get, is that desire to learn and to know and to want more out of the world. And to some degree, for some Capricorns, especially with this lunar eclipse, it's really trying to push you out into the world. Maybe you're traveling. I know it's about home and family right now, but maybe you're traveling, maybe you're looking towards the horizon, so to speak, or maybe it's more philosophical. This is a lunar eclipse where you need to really state what you believe in, what do you stand for, what do you think is true. Maybe it's about right and wrong. Maybe it's about a legal matter. I hope not. But maybe you're publishing something. That could also be a way in which the 9th gets activated. It is Pisces season. Pisces is your third voice, communication, how you think and listen and learn. So there is a push and pull between these two spaces. Keep in mind that Mercury is retrograde. So whatever sort of, I'm going to make a joke for a second, but how sometimes we want to, the hill that we're going to die on, that sort of that issue that we're really going to fight. Well, maybe sometimes with that Mercury retrograde, we need to make sure that we're not so blind that we're not seeing it from a different point of view. I know you're not a Sagittarius, but I'm sort of say this as sort of Sagittarius karmas, where Sagittarius is usually 99.9% of the time right, but it's just that one point. And so I'm saying that, even though you're Capricorn, it's just a reminder that, maybe you're right, Capricorn, but it's that 0.1% that's going to get you. So it's to really make sure that you're seeing everything that you need to see, that you're sort of keeping an open mind, that you're being curious, that you're looking at things from different points of views, because maybe that will help navigate some of this eclipse energy. I also want to add something for Capricorn, because Mars is now in Pisces. So there's a lot of things that may be said. With Mars is typically not a diplomat. It has something to say when it's in the third. And so that's going to really add to some of those qualities. So just before you say something, just make sure that you're just taking a second to listen to your intuition, to question yourself, to get a different point of view. Okay, now I'm done, Capricorn. Aquarius. So Saturn is your planet, and Saturn, as you know, since February 13th has been in Aries. I had to think about that for a second. So Aries is something called your third sign for the next 2 years. And of course, every Aquarius will live this differently. Your priority, Saturn is always our long-term priority, is how you speak, how you listen, how you learn, how you communicate. It could be a time where education really gets pushed to the forefront. You're taking more classes, you're learning a language, you're writing a book. If it's not information and ideas, it's more about movement and how you move your body and how your life moves. If it's not that, it's travel. Maybe it's really highlighting travel for you. But to some degree, Saturn is also authority and mentorship and leadership. And maybe there's something that there's an opportunity that will come into your life to be more of a mentor or of a leader. And it's how you use your voice, it's how you speak, and the authority behind how you speak. And if you are an expert on a certain subject matter, maybe that's another way that this energy is coming to the forefront over the next 2 years. That said, I guess hard speaking. So Mars will get into this space on April 9th. I know that it's not April 9th, but I just sort of want to put April into your horizon, because it's a time when this new time for you will get really activated. So April 9th all the way into the middle of May. But it's March. And March is Pisces season, and Pisces is something called your second sign of money, income, material stability, and security. Now, this is the same space that Saturn was in over the last 3 years. And it is well worn, and maybe you did a lot of heavy lifting around money or income, or maybe you worked hard to earn more, or you really set some financial systems in place, or you really got in deep about these sort of bigger existential questions, like what's truly of value and importance to you. But the sun works on a very different level than Saturn. So the sun is moving through this space that Saturn occupied but the sun is bringing this sort of time forward, that time that you learned these deeper lessons with Saturn in Pisces 2023 to the beginning of 2026. And that said, we will have a lunar eclipse this week. This lunar eclipse is in something called your 8th. So imagine in your astrology, sorry, I had to make sure, yes, 8th. Imagine your astrology is something that happens around you. You're not just an Aquarius. Each sign represents a different part of your life. If it's a calendar, then Virgo represents the 8th month, the 8th sign, the 8th room, as I like to call it. And it is a time and a space where you need to look inward. The role of the 8th is to get us to face ourselves. If we never question ourselves, if we never look inward, do we grow? Absolutely not. It is a space of vulnerability, trust, power, control, intimacy. And if these are points that maybe you feel a bit awkward around, then this is your season, this is your lunar eclipse to really sit with this energy. How do I be more vulnerable? How do I open up? What's my relationship with trust? So this lunar eclipse could put something into the spotlight, something that is typically hidden, something that maybe is even hidden from yourself, because the real power of the 8th is to take us into our unconscious, what we can't see and what we need to see so that we can grow and transform. So really sit with what is coming up for you. It could mean something that you need to really look at and make a transformation and make a transmutation so that something can shift inwardly. But this could be a lunar eclipse that's pushing buttons on sensitive topics or subject matters. It's not just intimacy and trust and vulnerability. It could also be safety, security. Do I have enough? Am I safe? Can I trust? Can I open up? If it's not the psychological and emotional side of things, it could be financial. It's very much getting into finance and assets and financial planning, and do I have enough, and planning for the future and estates and legacies. And maybe that's one of the ways in which the eclipse is showing up. But do keep in mind that Mercury is retrograde. There's something that's possible that's coming up from the past, something that we need to resolve, something that we haven't seen, and that will give you hopefully the conclusion that you need in this part of your life. I will add that Mars is also into your second sign now, so money, finance, and spending and assets, that's something that's really coming to the forefront already. So just sort of adding to the sort of a financial and psychological and emotional themes throughout March. Pisces, happy birthday, Pisces. Heck of a time right now. The sun has been in Pisces since February 18th, so we are about halfway-ish through Pisces season. We have a lunar eclipse tomorrow, and this lunar eclipse is in something called your 7th sign. The 7th sign is the sign of relationships, connections, socialization, because we're not meant to live life alone. So you had an eclipse in this space September 2025, March of 2025. So it's possible that whatever is going on has a connection already to that time. You could even go back to December of 2025, so not that long ago, 3 months ago, and maybe something from that time is now coming to the forefront. But that said, it's a very dynamic time in Pisces' astrology, and this is sort of capping off a larger dynamic time in Pisces' astrology. With Mercury in Pisces, there's a lot of back and forth that's between you and other people. Mercury is retrograde, so there's something that needs a second look, a different point of view. Loose ends need to be tied up, and maybe it's about a relationship, or maybe it's something from the past. Maybe it's about different choices, or even you taking the lead from a very different point of view. As of today, March 2nd, Mars is also in Pisces. So Mars is really motivating, inspiring you, empowering you, activating you. And Mars also isn't a diplomat. And I know there's a lot of focus on relationships, but maybe with the dynamic that's happening in astrology, it's for you not to be a doormat, or for you to really stand up for yourself. And with Mars in your sign for the next 6 weeks, you may not be a pushover. You may have all this emotional energy, and maybe even a little bit of anger that comes up, because Mars can sometimes be anger. But whatever is happening, it's interesting, because Saturn was in Pisces the last 3 years. Saturn has moved on, but Mars and even Mercury is resurfacing that space. And I think one of the hardest things about Saturn and Pisces the last few years, perhaps for you, is that it really was on you. You had a lot on your shoulders, so to speak. You needed to really step into a new phase of your life. With Mars now there, Mars hasn't been in Pisces since April of 2024 into May 2025. It's really pushing you to step up into a space that I think you were working the past few years to step up into. But a lot is going on in your astrology, and as a result, maybe a lot of things are going on in your life. So there you go. That is your look at the astrology of this week. Like I said, lots going on in the world. So just thinking of you all. And so lunar eclipse this week. I'm probably have a lot to talk about next week. And as I said in the introduction, I'm also doing a workshop on March 21st. So this is meant to be an intimate workshop where we're really working with the energies of Mars and Aries, the equinox, and with Saturn and Neptune as our guide. So we are bringing the energy of new beginnings and resetting, sort of plotting out a course for the new year. It is meant to be like a holistic experience. So it's not just me talking, it's really doing meditations, doing practices, sharing, opening up, and really creating a container of an experience for change and transformation to happen. So I hope you can join my Sacred Fire workshop on March 21st, 1 to 4 p.m. Eastern. It is recorded for those that can't be there live, and there you go. So I thank you all for this week, and I will see you next week. Take care.